name is Stacie, Fourstar, and my maiden name is Smith. I grew up on a Fort Peck Indian reservation, and I primarily grew up and went to school in Poplar and Wolf Point, and I graduated from Poplar in 1991. It's gonna date me, but it's been a long time ago. So I lived in Poplar, Wolf Point, Oswego, and went back and forth between the Sioux and Assiniboine side, I guess, on both sides of Tule Creek. And you know, we all have a lot of family here, so I got a lot of experience with my grandfather was, you know, the cowboy. So I got to go to the east side of the reservation, go to brandings, and be around horses and cattle. My grandmother was a nurse for IHS for over 40 years, so she had the experience with the medical field. And then my mother and my father, who raised me, introduced me to the Assiniboine Lodge. So that became a big part of my growing up. And you know, it was always there for me, and kind of took it for granted at times, you know, and people, as I got older, I didn't realize how much of a influence that really had on me, and not realizing that not everybody gets to go to Sweat. Not everybody, you know, gets to learn about, you know, our culture from that perspective of spirituality. And it's not just, you know, powwows or what you see on TV. So that really had an effect on my upbringing, but it took me a while to realize that. And, you know, growing up, it was like the memories I have are such good memories, and the career path, I guess, as I was growing up was business, accounting, those type of things came easier for me. So I started going to school. I actually started at FPCC. I took classes here, and I worked for the BIA for a short time after high school. Then I went to college, and then I kind of couldn't decide what I wanted to do, so I ended up getting an associate degree in accounting. Then I was going to go for my bachelor's in business. And so during this time, I left the reservation. I left in 1997, and I was gone for 10 years. In those 10 years, I only came home twice, and I lived everywhere. I lived in Georgia, Missouri, Texas, California, Hawaii, and you know, I got to see the country and did some traveling, and it really put it into perspective for me how much my home meant to me. And some people don't get a chance to see that. They want to get off the reservation. I wanted to get back on. So I was ready to come home, and I wanted to do whatever I could, you know, for my people, any way I could help them. And I wasn't really quite sure what that was going to be at the time. So I keep going to school, and I changed my degree to criminal justice. And the reason why I had that interest in the first place was my grandfather on my grandma's side. His name is Alonzo Three Stars. He's actually a cold case to this day. He was murdered in Poplar, found behind my grandma's house over by the elementary school, and to this day he is a cold case. And this was in the early 90s. And you know, ever since then I've had this interest in investigations, in law enforcement in general, but I knew I could never be a cop. I respect police officers a lot. I could never do that job. But I believe that it's a really good career choice. You know, corrections is also a good career choice for us here on a reservation. You know, we have the local college that can help with that, and we have the facilities here, and we have the training that's not too far from home. So going back to the schooling, I get my criminal justice degree. I get a Bachelor of Science in that, and then I came home. So I'm trying to figure out what I want to do for work. And I had come from NCIS, so I came from a federal background. I worked for Naval Criminal Investigative Services for the Navy. So I was a Department of Defense employee for some years, and that was my interest. So I had the opportunity to be a special agent, but it would require me to go live overseas. And my children at the time were going into high school, my older two, and that wasn't an option that was going to be feasible. So we came back here, and I went to the court one day, and it's so funny because I've never been there. Like I hadn't, you know, I had no idea what the tribal justice system was really about, and you know, I had my share of I probably should have been there. Luckily I wasn't, but I've had my share of getting in trouble, and luckily nothing ever serious enough that warranted having to be a constant customer over there. So I go there and I started talking to the prosecutor, and they had a job opening, and they knew I had the degree in criminal justice. I had no idea what that entailed, a prosecutor, but I was like, sure, I could do that. I could figure it out. I'll go there. I applied for the job, and I started working there in January of 2008. I had just moved home in August of 2007, so I had a few months there. I actually subbed at the schools for a while, and I give credit to teachers because there's no way I could be a teacher. I highly respect teachers and the job they do. So that also, is such an awesome career choice to have for teachers from here, come back here and teach the kids, because they know them, they know their families. So I worked there. I started in 2008, and I remained there. So I go through the ladder of assistant prosecutor, lead prosecutor. I apply and get selected for an associate judge, and this is before the judges went on a ballot. Well, in 2010, the Tribal Law and Order Act came out from the Obama administration, and it was going to give tribes a little more authority with sentencing. Could sentence over a year, because under the Indian Civil Rights Act right now, it's 1 year max that you can spend in a tribal jail for any offense, even homicide. So this was going to give us a little more teeth in the sentencing area, but there were stipulations. You had to be law trained, and how that's interpreted is you had to have a law degree. And there are other stipulations and regulations within the federal act that made me realize, well, at the time we didn't have any law trained attorneys working in a tribal court. We didn't have any judges that were law trained. We didn't have any prosecutors that were law trained. So I decided that I was going to apply for law school. And at the time, there was a program called NAIL, Native Americans into Law, and it was in North Dakota. So I got recruited to North Dakota. I took the LSAT. I didn't realize that you had to take a test to even see if you could make it into law school and be accepted. So I took the test, I applied, got accepted, and I went to law school, and they paid my tuition. But it required me to take a leave of absence from my job, take a leave of absence from my family for a short time, because I had to stay there and study for the first 6 months without any interruptions. And so that was really hard. And I made it through that first semester, and I thought, well, I think I can do this. It's been a long time since I went to school, because it was 2012. It's a 3-year program. Stayed there for the full 3 years, and I graduated. And in between, though, I got a lot of experience, and my whole intent was to come back to Fort Peck. I went to law school specifically to come back. But during that time, I knew I needed a little more experience. So, one summer I went and clerked for Fredericks Peoples in Morgan, which is a Native American law firm, and I worked in Rapid City. Got some experience there with other tribes and with private practice. Then one summer after that, I went and I was selected for a UDAL congressional internship. So I was actually the first person out of the North Dakota School of Law in Grand Forks to ever be selected for that, so it was kind of a big deal. So it's a UDAL foundation, and they do scholarships, but they do internships for congressional. It's actually, I think it depends on where you come from, but for me, because I came from North Dakota, I got to work with Heidi Heitkamp, and she was a congresswoman at the time, the senator. So I worked in her office, and it was about 3 months, and that gave me a real perspective of what it's like to work on a hill in DC, fast paced, everybody moving every day, decisions being made on the spot. And if you go to the television and you watch C-SPAN, that's what you're going to see. You're going to see everybody constantly moving, votes going. You have to be up on the politics, reading every day, getting up, riding into the city, riding back, So it was a good experience having all of that, and you make a lot of friends and a lot of connections, so the networking really helped out a lot. But I also worked with the Senate for the Committee on Indian Affairs, so I got to see other tribes come and see how other tribes operate. They bring their leaders in, what they say to their senators, to their congresspeople, and how the decision-making process is. So seeing it from the federal government side and in working with the tribal side, it helped me understand better why things happen here the way they do, whether it's federal money coming down, whether it's laws being passed, and that people, even here on this level, we can make a difference. We can make our voice heard. We just have to know how to do that. And without having that experience, I don't think that I would be holding the position I am right now of Chief Judge, because it really opened up my eyes to there's so much more that we can do on the level that we're at here. So I came back in 2015. I graduated from law school May of 2015. I worked for Senator Heitkamp, and then I came home, and that's when the judges went on the ballot. So the decision had been made 2 years prior in 2015. The vote went out on a referendum to the people, and they decided they wanted to elect their judges. So I ran for Chief Judge in 2015, and I was elected, and it is a 4-year term. And in the code, it was a 4-year term before the election had even occurred. It was an appointment that was made, though, from the government. And so looking at from the perspective of the government, what I would really like as part of our education system in beginning in middle school, 5th grade, up until high school, to really push the government portion of it, the local government, the tribal government, the state government, the federal government, because if you know how all the governments are set up and how they're running, everything becomes much easier the later in life that you go to school, you talk to people, reading the news, that always helps, knowing what's going on in the world and in our country. But the process of the government, if you go to the school, and my daughter was in 5th grade last year, and they were learning about, how a bill works, how it starts and how it gets through the process, and when it finally gets signed and put into law, that whole process. And as she's telling me about it, I'm telling her, how does it work on a tribal side? And I don't know. They don't teach us that at school. Well, you go to school on a reservation, you live on a reservation. Why would they not teach that to you? You should know your local government. So after talking to her about it, she says, okay, so the chairman is our president. Yeah, our tribal council is our legislative body. Yes, you're getting it. So teaching that locally, I think, is key so people realize that even though we're, contained within these lands, we make big decisions that affect a lot of people. And a lot of people outside of Fort Peck, they look to Fort Peck because we're seen as leaders in the industry, right? Where they give us props on our court, props on the decisions that we make with our natural resources, our government to government relationships, our cross deputization, our colleges. There's a ton of things that the Indian country in general, nationwide, look at us for. And even indigenous people in other countries, on New Zealand, Australia, they reach out to us and ask us, how do you do this? And how did this work for you? VAWA was a big thing. So the Violence Against Women Act, when we enacted that here in Fort Peck, we were one of the 5 pilot tribes. So March of 2012 is when we took over jurisdiction over non-Indians, and it's a special jurisdiction, and it's only for crimes involving domestic violence. So a lot of people don't realize that we can take a non-Indian into tribal jail, into tribal court, if they commit certain crimes or are alleged to have committed certain crimes. And it's a big deal. That's a big deal around Indian country and around the nation. And that becomes a huge legislative fight, with the federal government. So knowing, what we have and how we want to preserve it, and knowing how to do that becomes, a learning matter that, I don't know how to express it enough, that we need to do this at a young age. We've got to teach people about their government. And I think that everybody should have constitutional law, just in general. Yeah. As a regular citizen, we should have constitutional law. And my grandmother, her name is Louise Smith, but her main name is Three Stars. She's from Pine Ridge, grew up, moved here when she was a nurse, and she's been here ever since she's in her 20s. So she's gonna be 97 this year. And when I talked to her about law school, we talked about voting and how important voting is. And, she didn't realize that because she was born a year after Indians were made citizens. So she didn't realize that when she was born, she was not even considered a citizen of the United States. And she said, how can that be? I'm from here. I was born and raised here. So I took her through, reading it to her, and to her, she was just amazed. Like, she did not know that she really wasn't a citizen. And so now being 97 and listening to her, one of the things that I learned at a later age too is listen to those stories, remember those stories, and ask those questions. Ask your elders, how did you do this? Where did this come from? And so now, I grew up being able to hunt, and took it for granted that that's just always going to be there, and it may not. If we don't preserve what we have and fight for those rights, it may go away. But also the perspective of dry meat, cutting up dry meat. Okay, what is that? Like, people see it hanging there. Take yourself through the process. Make yourself learn. Make yourself go out, take a walk. Find sage, look at the flowers, and you see a lot more people doing that now, where they are going out, and it's not just digging roots or looking for turnips. It's learning about the medicines and how to use them. So looking at the law and the leadership of women, and I think that was probably the primary focus of this, but as a female, it is, I guess, in my perspective, I feel that women are natural leaders and that there should be more women in leadership. And our council now has, quite a few women on there, and I'm really excited that our people their voting shows us that they believe in the same thing, that women in leadership are, the matriarchal side of things. I grew up knowing that, the male may be the voice, but it's the female making the decision. And so I take a strong stance even in my own household, where it's the female making those decisions. And so in leadership, I find it more comfortable being in a position that I'm in. Maybe it's because of the values that my family had and the respect that I received, throughout my childhood. But you can learn those even later in life, and showing people respect and encouraging them and making them, believe in themselves that they can succeed in whatever they want. Because I never once recalled ever saying, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a doctor. And I know those are a lot of things, even my children say it too, but it ended up becoming the path that I took. And once I learned, what our justice system was all about, I was really enthusiastic and energized to get in there and, help others. And as a prosecutor, you're in a position of power. There's a lot of power in that office, but you're also in a position of helping others. You can make that change from the prosecutor's office. The public defenders, they're there to help you as well, and they can make change, but the power is really in the prosecutor's office. And I don't think a lot of people realize that you're not just there prosecuting crimes, you're there changing lives. You have all of the ability to ask the court and talk to the judge and say, this person may have done this bad thing, they made a bad decision, but it shouldn't define them for the rest of their lives. And so giving them an opportunity, that would be the place to start. And as a judge, you carry the final say. But if nobody's bringing those recommendations to you, how do you know, what you're going to decide on? But in the judicial position, I've come to appreciate with the election, that there is a standard that people have to meet before they can get on a ballot helps out so much, that everybody has to meet this certain standard. But within that, once you put a person in a position of power, you have a lot of expectations of them. That person who's put in power should keep those expectations and always maintain those ethics and remember why they're there in the first place. And I know people in leadership tend to, forget that, or people get a skewed image of them because they've been in her for so long, or, they forgot, who put them there, kind of thing. And so I think leaders need to be mindful of always remembering, why did you run in the first place? Why did you want to be in there? What did you want to do? I understand 2 years, 4 years, that may not be a lot of time to do things, but if you had a reason to go in there, you should have that ready to go. Here's the reason why I came. Now everybody get on board and help me out. So looking at our leaders now, we have a broad range of ages, right? We go from young to, elderly. And so it should show everybody here, like, you can be a leader at an early age. You can be a leader at an older age too. And it's just about your comfort level. And I think that Fort Peck is, real fortunate to have the people that we do now, with the women in leaders, and also the women that take the time to do projects like this with the Chante project, and bringing in so many other individuals, and having the president of college is female too. So there's a lot of good examples of females in leadership.